Hello, welcome to Intro to Prusa. My name is Brandon. I am a Learning Lab Specialist at the Gwinnett County Public Library. And today in this video, we will be going over the PrusaSlicer, which is for the Prusa printer. So if you've ever 3D printed before, this software is very similar to the Cura software that we use for the Lulz bots, but it is proprietary for Prusa. And to begin, before we start in the software, we need a file to print. So let's head on over to my favorite site, Thingiverse, and you can search for whichever you like. I'm just going to grab this vase that's right here. And you just have to download either here or go in and download each individual file. I've already done that, so I will bring them in. And you can either go to File, Import, or you can just drag and drop from your folder. So now we have both of our files in the PrusaSlicer, and we are putting them on the build plate here. And this reflects the actual build plate of the Prusa i3 MK3S. So we can see a general idea of what the size will end up being. And on the left, we have several transport options or other features. The first one is move, and this allows you to move your object over certain axes by dragging. The second is scale, and with this, we can expand the object to be as big as our build plate, or as small as we need. The next option is rotating. And again, we are given the options for the axes of the object. So we can move it on any of the three axes, however you'd like. The fourth option on this list is place on face. So objects in 3D printing will always print from the bottom up. And you always want a flat surface to begin. With this, sometimes the prints may come into the slicer at a weird angle or not positioned correctly. And with this tool, you just click, and this object will give you the faces that it can lie on. So we have this one and we have this bottom one. And because it's a cylinder, we have all these other little tiny ones. We can print it on that, but it's not going to do too well. Do it there or the bottom. That's the best. The option below that is cut, and this allows us to split our object along the z-axis. So if it's too tall, or we just want the top half of, say, a character figure or just their legs, we can just go to cut, line it up to where we want, and cut. And now we have two objects. And these are both unique objects. So we can move them wherever we want and print them, or just remove one and print a fancy teacup. The next two are painting on supports and seam painting. And for these examples, I'm going to grab a different file. I will be using this Baby Yoda. All right. Let's make him bigger. We can go through and move him around. If we wanted just his head, we could just chop him right there, but that's not nice. So with paint on supports and seam painting, they both work in a similar way, that you are either telling this function to happen or denying that function from happening. So when 3D printing, if an object has these items known as overhangs or free items, they will need supports, because the way 3D printing works, it needs a foundation to build off of. And so a lot of these free items don't have anything below them. So when they begin their print, they will just fall flat onto the build plate and likely mess up the success of your print. So first we can go over here on the right side of our screen, and you'll see the options for supports. You can give none, you can just do it for the build plate. For support enforcers, we'll do what you paint on, but we'll just show what everywhere looks like. And this will give supports to every part that is not of his main body. So we slice it. And this is what it would look like if you needed everything supported on Baby Yoda. And in likelihood on the print, the only things you would need are probably his ears, his hands, and that would probably do you good. So with the paint on supports, we can change this brush size. We can change the shape of it from a sphere to a circle. The sphere does it 360, so if you touched on a certain area, it would catch this side and the back of his ear. The circle is just this flat side right here. And then it doesn't go through. We can change the size of them. The left one enforces supports. So if I say enforce supports here, and let's change this support to support enforcers and slice, we can see that it will generate only supports for the parts that I selected. And this is useful if you have a figure, say, with a strong chin or their arms are out to the side. Or if you just, the higher up in the print, it doesn't seem like it could be safe. And on the other side, we have block supports. So since we already have this, if you right click, it will paint it on red. And you'll see that any of the spots that I have painted red will not get supports. So you see his thumb and the tip of his ear will not get supports. Right. And that is painting on supports. The next feature, seam painting, I'm going to use a different example. But seam painting effectively is on each print, they do it layer at a time. Each Z layer has its own revolution. And they always have to come back to the beginning at some point. Seam painting helps you either highlight or hide any visible seams you may see when it comes to meet around again. This object doesn't have too many, so I'm going to grab a different example. All right. And a lot of times these seams won't be visible in this 3D editor view, but if you're working in Tinkercad or if you go to the preview view after you have sliced, you can see some little notches that may affect your build. So let's just preview it and let's see. So we have one right here. This looks normal, but when you print it, it will become visible, or it likely will be visible. We have another, let's see, right here. And I've printed this object, and this one does come up in the print. So since we know it's right here, let's go back to our editor view and seam painting. And similar to the paint on supports, you can enforce or block a seam. With seam painting, the seam always has to exist. So if you only drew it in this line, it can draw the seams outside of this line. So if we just draw a whole box around this area that we know that one seam is, and block this area from having seams. When we slice it, they'll likely place the seams right at the barrier that this stops. So we see there's a barrier right here and the seam, and that's about it. And we can also, if we know of a perfect spot to hide or place our seams, we can do the same and enforce it. Say it's the back of your character and you want to put the seams right along their spine. You can just, again, changing the brush size if you need or anything. You can just draw straight down. And when we go to slice it, we should see a lot of seams right on this line that we drew. Right, and you can also add a brim if you need. This can provide additional support for tiny objects like some feet or anything, or if you want to give it some additional filament extrusion before you begin your print. Like that. And we can also, in our preview window, we're going to change back to Yoda. In our preview window, we can also do one additional interesting function. And that is that we can go along the Z-axis and the layer height to see what it will look like all the way from the beginning to the end of the print. So if we wanted to see how it was printing at this layer that we have right here, we can go in and we see all this infill, and we see the perimeter and some other aspects of our print. If we use this horizontal line, we can actually see the path that it takes. So from right over here, this is this new layer. And if we zing over, it just does. It shows us all it's going to do in the code for the 3D printer. And with Prusa, in this slicer, we can actually program the code to stop and make a filament color change. So say we want this bottom half of the Baby Yoda to be orange, and we want his head to be green, because why not? If we just see this plus that's right next to this and right click it, we can add a pause print, which can be a function that your printer tells you to do, like turn the object, or we can add a color change. And it asks you the color. This is not the color of the filament. This is just the color of this render that we see. Let's go with that. And then everything from this point on will be that color. And it will tell you once you get to this layer that you need to change your filament out. All right, and once we are ready and we have our supports, we didn't have any supports, we'll just do everywhere for now. We can slice, and once you do the slice, it will tell you a general time, an approximate time that it will take to print. So this one says with all these supports that it will take 6 hours. And if that sounds good, all you have to do is export it. These settings up here are referring to the fineness and quality of your layer height. 0.15 and 0.2 are both good. And these give you options. These have a lot of preset preferences in them. The second option is your filament. I'm using the PrusaSlicer PLA filament. And then the last option is to select your printer. And once that's all good, you just export your G code, name it, save it to your SD. The file name will keep that information in. So it'll have your layer height, it'll have your filament type, which printer it is, and how long it is in the file name. All right. And that is the introduction to the PrusaSlicer software. I hope your prints turn out successful and look great. And stay tuned to the Gwinnett County Public Library YouTube page for more awesome videos.